I am 73 years old as I write this. Not the kind of 73 that feels dramatic or ceremonial, just the quiet, ordinary number that appears on medical forms and birthday cards. And yet, it carries a weight that no other age ever did. Because only now do I understand something about life that I spent decades chasing, misunderstanding, and resisting. When you are young, you believe life is something you must conquer. You think clarity comes from speed, success comes from effort, and happiness arrives when you finally reach a destination you can point to and say, "This is it." I believed that too. I ran hard. I accumulated titles, obligations, and expectations. I learned how to look busy, how to sound confident, how to appear certain even when I was not. From the outside, my life looked like progress. From the inside, it felt like noise. No one tells you this early on. Most of what exhausts you is not work, but resistance. Resistance to uncertainty, resistance to loss, resistance to the simple fact that life does not unfold according to plans, no matter how carefully you draft them. I spent years trying to bend reality into something more comfortable, more predictable. I thought discipline meant control. I was wrong. In my 40s, I was convinced I was finally getting close. I had enough experience to avoid obvious mistakes, enough resources to feel secure, and enough confidence to speak as if I understood the world. That decade taught me the most dangerous illusion of all, the belief that understanding is permanent. Just when you think you have life figured out, it changes the rules without warning. Health falters, people leave. Priorities shift. What once felt urgent becomes irrelevant. What you ignored becomes central. By my 50s, fatigue set in, not physical exhaustion, but a deeper weariness. The kind that comes from carrying too many self-imposed burdens for too long. I had spent a lifetime trying to prove myself. To parents who were no longer alive. To colleagues who barely noticed. To an internal judge that never seemed satisfied. Success did not silence that voice. It only raised its standards. Here is what took me a lifetime to understand. Life is not asking you to win, it is asking you to participate honestly. This realization did not arrive as a sudden revelation, it came quietly, almost disappointingly. One morning, sitting alone with a cup of tea, I noticed something unsettling. I felt at peace without achieving anything that day. No deadlines met, no validation received, no progress to report, and yet nothing was missing. That moment frightened me more than failure ever did, because it challenged the entire framework I had lived by. We are taught, implicitly and relentlessly, that our value must be justified by productivity, by usefulness, by recognition. But life does not operate on a performance review system. It moves forward whether you impress anyone or not. The trees outside my window grow without ambition. The seasons change without apology, and somehow, that is enough. Understanding this does not make you passive, it makes you precise. You stop scattering your energy across things that do not matter. You become selective with your attention, careful with your time, and ruthless about what you allow into your inner life. You realize that peace is not something you earn after decades of struggle, it is something you allow once you stop fighting reality. I regret many things, but not for the reasons people expect. I do not regret working hard. I regret confusing urgency with importance. I regret postponing presence. I regret believing that there would be a future version of myself with more time, more patience, more freedom. That version never arrives. There is only this one. At whatever age you are reading this, at 73, I no longer chase answers. I watch patterns. I listen more than I speak. I notice how little is actually required for a good day. A meaningful conversation, a body that cooperates, a mind that is not at war with itself. Everything else is decoration. If there is one quiet truth I wish I had accepted earlier, it is this. Life becomes lighter the moment you stop demanding that it prove something to you. It does not exist to fulfill your expectations. It exists to be experienced moment by moment as it is. This understanding did not make me wiser overnight. It made me calmer. And calm, I have learned, is a far more useful state than confidence. There is a strange relief that comes with age, not because life becomes easier, but because you finally see what was never worth the effort. At 73, I can say with certainty that much of what consumed my younger years did not deserve the attention I gave it. I chased approval as if it were oxygen. I chased certainty as if doubt were a personal failure. I chased the idea of being right instead of being at peace. None of those pursuits made life richer, they only made it louder. When you are younger, approval feels like proof of existence. A nod from the right person, recognition from the right institution, admiration from people you barely know, it all feels essential. I structured decisions around how they would look, not how they would feel. And the tragedy is not that approval is fleeting, it is that it trains you to abandon your own judgment. Over time, you forget how to ask yourself a simple question: is this actually right for me? I wish I had understood sooner that most opinions are weightless. People judge quickly, forget immediately, and move on. Yet we live as if every glance is permanent, every comment archival. The fear of being misunderstood kept me silent when I should have spoken and talkative when I should have remained quiet. It took decades to realize that being misunderstood is not a flaw, it is an inevitability. Another thing I chased relentlessly was certainty. I wanted guarantees, that my choices were correct, that my sacrifices would pay off, that the people I invested in would remain. Life offers none of these assurances. The demand for certainty only increases anxiety because reality refuses to comply. Once I accepted that uncertainty is not a problem to be solved, but a condition to be lived with, my decisions became simpler. I stopped waiting for perfect clarity and started acting with honest intention instead. I also chased efficiency, mistaking it for wisdom. I tried to optimize everything: time, relationships, even rest. I treated life like a system to be managed. But efficiency strips experiences of depth. Some things are meant to take time. Grief cannot be rushed. Relationships cannot be streamlined. Understanding yourself is not a productivity task. The moments that shaped me most were inefficient, inconvenient, and emotionally untidy. Perhaps the most damaging chase of all was the pursuit of an imagined future self. I told myself, later, I'll slow down. Later, I'll enjoy this. Later, I'll say no. Later became a place where life was supposed to begin. But later is a moving target. It keeps retreating as long as you keep postponing presence. I lost years living in anticipation instead of participation. Here is what replaced chasing. Choosing. Choosing where to invest energy. Choosing who gets access to my time. Choosing silence over explanation. Choosing enough over more. These choices did not make life smaller, they made it clearer. When you stop chasing, you see how little you actually need to live well. I am not suggesting detachment from ambition or effort. I am suggesting discernment. Work hard, but on things that align with who you are, not who you are trying to impress. Care deeply, but not at the expense of your inner stability. Want things, but do not let wanting become the background noise of your entire life. If I could speak to my younger self, I would not tell him to aim lower. I would tell him to aim truer. To stop running toward mirrors and start paying attention to substance. To understand that peace is not found at the finish line because there is no finish line, only a gradual understanding of what is worth carrying and what should have been put down long ago. That understanding did not arrive early for me, but it arrived in time. One of the hardest realizations that comes with age is not what you did wrong, but what you were never fully there to experience. At 73, memories do not return as full scenes. They arrive as fragments, a room, a voice, a feeling you can no longer reconstruct completely. And what I notice now is how often I was physically present but mentally elsewhere. I attended dinners while rehearsing tomorrow's worries. I listened to people while preparing my response. I watched my children grow while thinking about what came next. At the time, this felt responsible. In reality, it was absence disguised as diligence. We underestimate how much life happens in moments we treat as transitional. Waiting rooms, quiet mornings, ordinary conversations. We label them as filler, as something to endure on the way to what matters. But when you look back, those moments are the substance. The milestones are few, the in-between is everything. I once believed presence was a luxury, something you could afford once responsibilities were handled. That belief is backwards. Presence is not the reward for a well-managed life. It is the condition that makes life feel lived at all. Without it, even success feels hollow because you were never fully there to receive it. The cost of distraction is subtle. It does not announce itself as loss. It accumulates quietly. You miss the tone shift in a conversation. You overlook a small sign of fatigue in someone you love. You fail to notice when a chapter is ending. By the time you realize it, the opportunity for attention has passed. Technology amplified this absence, but it did not invent it. We were already practicing mental escape long before screens gave us permission. The device simply made it easier to be everywhere except where you are. I do not blame the tools. I blame the habit of postponing attention, of telling yourself that now is not important enough to deserve your full awareness. Here is the uncomfortable truth. Later does not remember what you did today. Only now does. When you are older, you do not regret the days you rested. You regret the days you rushed through without noticing them. Presence does not require constant mindfulness or forced gratitude. It is simpler than that. It is the decision to stay with what is happening instead of mentally negotiating with the future, to let a conversation end without redirecting it, to feel boredom without anesthetizing it, to allow a moment to be ordinary without trying to extract value from it. I learned late that attention is a form of respect toward others and toward your own life. When you offer it fully, even briefly, experiences deepen, relationships soften, time feels less adversarial, you stop feeling chased by life and start walking alongside it. At 73, I no longer try to fill silence. I let moments land. I notice when my mind drifts and gently bring it back, not out of discipline, but out of care. There are fewer days ahead than behind, and that makes attention more precious, not more anxious. If there is one habit I would change earlier, it is this. I would stop treating the present as a waiting room. Life does not begin after the next task, the next phase, the next resolution. It is already happening, quietly, asking only that you notice. There comes a point, quiet, unspectacular, when you realize that holding on is costing you more than letting go ever could. No one announces this moment. It does not arrive with drama or ceremony. It shows up as a gentle fatigue, a sense that you are tired of carrying things that no longer belong to you. For most of my life, I believed letting go was a form of failure. If I stopped trying, stopped fixing, stopped maintaining certain relationships or identities, I assumed it meant I had given up too soon. Persistence was praised, endurance was admired, walking away felt like weakness. It took decades to understand that discernment looks very similar to surrender from the outside, but it is something entirely different on the inside. We cling to roles long after they have expired. The reliable one, the strong one, the one who always understands, always absorbs, always adjusts. At some point, these identities stop serving anyone, including you. Age reveals this not through theory, but through limitation. Your energy narrows, your tolerance shortens, and in that narrowing, truth appears. Letting go is not about erasing the past. It is about releasing the obligation to keep reliving it. Old grievances lose their edge when you realize how much space they occupy in a life that is already finite. Regret softens when you see that every choice was made with the understanding you had at the time. Even resentment, once examined honestly, is often just unexpressed disappointment asking to be acknowledged. I used to believe forgiveness was something you offered others. Now I know it is something you give yourself first. Forgiveness is not approval. It is the decision to stop paying interest on an old debt. You do not forget what happened. You simply refuse to let it define the remainder of your days. There is also a quieter form of letting go, releasing the need to be seen a certain way. Age makes reputation feel oddly irrelevant. The urge to explain yourself fades. You stop correcting misunderstandings unless they truly matter. You accept that people will hold partial versions of you and that this is not your responsibility to manage. What replaces attachment is not emptiness, but space. Space to rest without guilt. Space to change your mind without justification. Space to enjoy simplicity without defending it. This space is not dramatic, but it is profoundly stabilizing. It allows life to move again, unencumbered by old narratives. I once feared that letting go would make life smaller. It did the opposite. It removed friction. It revealed how little force is actually required to live well. When you stop gripping, you regain sensitivity. You notice subtleties you once bulldozed past. You hear yourself think again. At 73, I am still learning how to release expectations, timelines, and the illusion that things must resolve neatly. Life does not tidy itself up at the end. It simply continues until it does not. Letting go is how you meet that reality without bitterness. If I could pass on one final understanding from this chapter, it would be this. You do not let go because you are done caring. You let go because you finally care enough about the life you have left to stop carrying what no longer belongs to it. When you remove what is unnecessary, the noise, the performance, the endless explanations, what remains is surprisingly small, and that is not a loss. It is a relief. At 73, life feels narrower in scope, but deeper in texture. Fewer ambitions, fewer obligations, fewer people whose approval carries weight. What is left are fundamentals, health, attention, honesty, and a quiet sense of enough. I once believed a meaningful life had to be full. I now know it has to be clear. Stripping life down does not happen all at once. It happens through repeated disappointments, small awakenings, and moments where excess simply stops making sense. You realize you do not miss what you thought was essential. You notice how quickly the mind adjusts once it is no longer fed constant stimulation. You learn that peace is not fragile, it was only buried. What remains is not constant happiness, it is steadiness, a capacity to sit with discomfort without immediately trying to escape it, a willingness to let days be unremarkable without labeling them wasted, a quiet gratitude that is not celebratory, but grounded. I used to measure days by output, now I measure them by alignment. Did I act in a way that respected my energy? Did I speak honestly without unnecessary sharpness? Did I allow myself to be fully where I was? These are not grand metrics, but they are reliable ones. They do not depend on external conditions, which means they still work when circumstances deteriorate, as they inevitably do. Age also clarifies relationships. What remains are not the most impressive or longest-standing connections, but the most easeful ones. The people with whom silence is not awkward. The ones who do not require you to be edited. You stop confusing intensity with intimacy. You value consistency over excitement, sincerity over charm. Perhaps the most important thing that remains is trust not in outcomes, but in your ability to respond. When you are younger, you try to secure the future. When you are older, you learn to trust yourself to meet it as it comes. This trust is not optimism. It is earned through survival, through knowing you have endured uncertainty before and did not disappear. I no longer ask life to be impressive. I ask it to be honest. I no longer expect clarity before action. I move with the clarity available. And when it changes, as it always does, I adjust without interpreting that adjustment as failure. If there is wisdom in age, it is not found in answers, but in proportion, knowing what deserves urgency and what does not, knowing when effort adds value and when it only adds strain, knowing that a life well lived does not look dramatic from the outside, but it feels coherent from within. This is what remains when you strip life down. Fewer questions, fewer demands, fewer illusions. And in their place, something sturdier, a life that is not impressive, but inhabitable. When you reach an age where more of life sits behind you than ahead, you stop asking what you can still become and start asking what is worth passing on. At 73, I do not feel the need to summarize my life as a lesson. Life resists being reduced that way. But there is one truth that has outlasted every phase, every success, every disappointment. If I were to leave anything behind, it would be this. You do not need to understand life in order to live it well. For most of my years, I believed comprehension was the goal. That if I could just make sense of things, people, patterns, outcomes, I would finally feel at ease. I read, analyzed, reflected, revised. I treated life like a puzzle that would eventually reveal a clear picture. It never did. And the pursuit of understanding often pulled me further from the experience itself. What finally brought peace was not insight, but acceptance. Acceptance that some things remain unresolved, that some relationships end without closure, that some efforts do not produce proportional results. That meaning is not something you extract from life, but something that emerges when you stop interrogating it. This does not mean living passively or carelessly. It means living without the constant demand for justification. You act according to your values, adjust when necessary, and release the need for a final explanation. Life becomes less of an argument and more of a conversation, sometimes coherent, sometimes confusing, but ongoing. If I look back honestly, the moments that mattered most were not the ones I understood at the time. They were the ones I was simply present for. A hand held without knowing what to say. A decision made without certainty, but with integrity. A loss endured without a story to soften it. Meaning arrived later, if at all. We are taught to seek answers. Age teaches you to live with questions, not anxiously, but comfortably. You stop rushing to label experiences. You let them be unfinished. This is not resignation. It is maturity. The greatest relief of old age is not freedom from responsibility. It is freedom from unnecessary interpretation. You no longer need every event to say something about you. You stop personalizing randomness. You understand that much of life is not commentary, it is simply occurrence. If someone younger were to ask me for advice, I would not give them a strategy. I would offer a permission, the permission to live without fully understanding, to choose without guarantees, to let life be imperfect without turning that imperfection into a verdict. At 73, I do not feel enlightened. I feel unburdened. And that, I have learned, is often the truest form of wisdom. This is where I will stop, not because there is nothing more to say, but because life does not require a conclusion to be complete.